a series of 3 questions on which each speaker will speak for 2 minutes. The first question is the following. Is the continued underrepresentation of women and racial minorities in the top ranks of the business and political worlds a problem? And if so, is it a problem that should be addressed through public policy?
Yes, I think that's a problem because particularly with those 2 groups, minorities and women, we've seen that they haven't had equal opportunity due to various wrongs that our country has done in the past, and discrimination and practices of racial segregation. So that's true, but it's not a problem just because they're underrepresented. Underrepresentation does not mean there's a problem. For example, the NBA has primarily African-American basketball players. And no one would ever argue that that's a problem because there's clear equal opportunity and that the NBA is composed of the best possible players in the country, well, in the world. Now, the problem is that if we have women and minorities not reaching these positions when we have equal opportunity, well, that's a problem with results. So we should be striving to make sure they have equal opportunity and not just give them the result.
Thank you. First of all, to address the question, first of all, this is obviously a problem, and I think the most effective way to cure society of exclusionary practices is to make special efforts at inclusion, which is exactly what affirmative action does. Now, I think, to clear one thing up, I think the biggest problem whenever we discuss affirmative action in any setting, as was the case with my opponent's opening statement, I think the opening statement demonstrates a clear misunderstanding of the purpose of affirmative action. Affirmative action does not seek to create diversity, or artificial diversity at that. It seeks to ensure fairness and an even playing field. Now, we don't want artificial diversity. We just want minorities, women, to have a fair chance. You know, affirmative action does not necessarily say that, you know, our goal is not to take an African American over a white person. That's not necessarily our goal. Our goal stems from the fact and the proven notion by statistics, research, and just looking out at the world that poverty, lack of education, lack of ability to get tutors, lack of ability to get food, shelter, those problems, those systemic economic issues plague African American communities, minority communities, at an astoundingly higher rate than they plague primarily white communities. And we are not trying to ensure artificial diversity, we are allowing diversity. Now, there is diversity on a global level in the economy, in business, in many different sectors. And the 14th Amendment ensures equal opportunity. The Republican Party stands for, you know, lack of government intervention, letting people do what they deserve to do. And I think we're trying to make sure that that's enforced, not do anything additional for minorities and African Americans. We're simply trying to ensure that they have that opportunity, that their Constitution, just like it's my Constitution as a white foreign male, that it's their right as much as it is mine. Not to give them anything more than I'm given, to ensure the sameness.
Is giving certain groups preferential treatment in hiring or admission to academic institutions consistent with the constitutional guarantee of equal protection laws to all men?
I think it's pretty obvious from the question. Is giving preferential treatment to certain groups, does that fall within equal protection under the law? I think it's quite obvious that it doesn't. It's trying to compensate by past wrongs. My opponent mentioned various things that certain minority groups are plagued by. Education, not having enough of it. Poverty, not having full access to get the kind of education or to get out of poverty. Why don't we attack those things? Why don't we try to make education systems better in the inner cities? Why don't we attack poverty? Why are we trying to go to the top? Now, equal protection, it's not equal for admissions officers or employers that feel compelled to take minorities or certain other groups over the best qualified candidate. And it's not equal for the people that are qualified for the positions that get shut out of those positions. So no, it doesn't.
Okay. Now, I'd like to point out 2 things. First of all, the misconception that this is giving them preferential treatment. First of all, the movie Crash, which won Academy Awards Best Picture of the Year a number of years ago, is a great film I'm sure a large percentage of our audience here has seen. Now, my opponent states that these problems are only in lower income areas of African Americans, for example. Now, in the movie, one of the vignettes featured, Terrence Howard portrays a movie producer who is, you know, wealthy economically, drives a black Lincoln Navigator through a wealthy area. Now, him and his wife are pulled over. His wife is abused sexually, assaulted by a white police officer. That is the undertones of discrimination that we see in our society. despite whatever we do with economics, with our stimulus bill or anything to help all people, namely African Americans and others in poverty, that discrimination in the seeds of our minds, whether or not we'd like to admit it, is still there. And affirmative action is not a system that allows liberals to give rights to people that we seemingly like. You know, affirmative action has been present in 9 presidential administrations, 6 of which have been Republican, 3 of which have been Democratic. You know, in this past presidential primary, we had Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and John Edwards as the 3 top contenders. There was a poignant line, Elizabeth Edwards, wife of John Edwards, said, you know, we can't make John black or make him a woman. No, she can't. But at the same time, Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama's ancestors could not have helped the fact that purely because of a characteristic they were born with, they did not have access to the opportunities that Senator Edwards had. You know, the reality is we are not doing anything extra. We're simply leveling the playing field so at the beginning of the game, when that clock goes off, everyone has equal opportunity.
The third question I'd like each of you to address is the following. All public policies have costs and benefits. What do you say are the main costs and the main benefits of affirmative action programs?
Well, I dare say that I disagree with the premise of the question because I don't think this particular policy has any benefits. But in particular, the costs, I think I touched on a few of them. One, you're taking people that may not be qualified for a position and putting them in a position where they cannot succeed. 2, you're tainting the achievements of people who are qualified and should be able to succeed without their achievements being tainted. For example, my opponent elicits Barack Obama. Are we really going to say that Barack Obama got to where he was because of affirmative action, because he received preferential treatment, because of this inherent disadvantage that he had? I mean, as much as I disagree with him politically, I have nothing but respect for his intelligence and his hard work that got him to where he is. Now, the benefits that people talk about are that, you know, my opponent says that it's not about diversity, it's not artificial, it's real diversity. And you talk about leveling the playing field. But affirmative action does not level the playing field. It does not at all. It evens out the scoreboard maybe, but it doesn't level the playing field. The playing field is where we start. What my opponent said with education, poverty, where we come from, if we have those opportunities. Those are the issues that we should be focusing on. We shouldn't be focusing on where we end up, the end result, if we get this job or get into that university. Those are the results.
Thank you. One of the things I wanted to address was that, you know, the United States Department of Labor over the course of history, and it was just released last year in August, developed a survey on the impact that affirmative action has had on our society. And they found that 5 million minority members and 6 million white minority women moved up in the workforce as a result of it. And to boot, the Department of Labor released statistics saying that there are 1.3 million unemployed black civilians and 112 million employed white civilians, according to the most recent census. Now, thus, according to that, even if every unemployed black worker in the United States were to displace a white worker, 1% of whites would be affected at worst. Now, the benefits to this are obviously ensuring equal opportunity for all. Now, I don't think any of us could deny, you know, as idealistic as we may be, as conservative or liberal as we may be, that there is an inherent seed of racism in all of us. We cannot deny it. You know, the movie Crash that I cited earlier, you know, just the fact that we are implicitly primed to think of certain things when we see an African American, or we see a woman, or we see an Asian, as opposed to when we see a white male in front of us. I think that this is not evening the scoreboard, it's allowing these people a chance to get where they may be. Now, a quota system is not something that we're advocating here. We're advocating to ensure the enforcement of the 14th Amendment as written. You know, the Republicans are often strict constructionists when it comes to interpretation of the Constitution and Supreme Court decisions, things of that nature. Now, we are up here simply ensuring that that practice of original jurisdiction is possible. We're ensuring that equal protection for all is possible. Without these programs to combat this injustice in our society, white males would be given an inherent advantage. Now, there have been numerous psychological, sociological, and government studies done to give evidence to this concept of implicit priming. You know, the Brown versus Board of Education decision, the experiment with giving a young child a girl doll, black doll, versus a girl, white doll, we see that this implicit sense of racism is present, and this is simply meant to level the playing field before the game starts.